Hello, Psych of Emotion. We're going to talk a little bit about courage. I've been trying every year to do an emotion of the year, kind of emotion in depth, and some of them become problematic because we're not necessarily sure by definition whether they're emotion or something bigger than an emotion. And you'll notice that I've got two uploaded already. The emotion of hate, and the emotion of God, what was the other one? So there's hatred, and there's another one loaded up there. Anyway, so about every year I'm going in depth. Better for me to learn more about the field, and certainly I hope a better offering to you. I did courage. I decided to do courage to close out spring 2020. Psychology of emotion. It became pretty obvious to me prior to spring break that we weren't coming back. Just knowing about pandemics, how pandemics operate, it didn't seem feasible. It seemed like it was going to explode in numbers, and wow, it sure did. We were not allowed to come back from spring break, so I did courage because I look at you Buckeyes and the way you approach, the courageous way you approach the pandemic, etc. And I hope that we continue those efforts. So here it is, courage. What I have done new for this semester is I've tied a little assignment to it to further explore it, and hopefully that is useful. But this one is about you guys. This is for the Buckeyes. So dedication done, and admiration as always for you and the position you're in. So I call this the irony of courage. And why is it ironic? Well, according to Mark Twain, courage is resistance of fear, mastery of fear, but not the absence of fear. And one thing that almost everyone who writes about courage, in fact, I'm reading Paul Tillich's book, Courage to Be, right now, and just reading it this morning, it was like, he says, like everyone agrees, all the philosophers, psychologists say the courage requires fear. Without fear, there can't be courage. And so that's kind of irony. So historically, courage, what do we know? And we know history's fair game in this class because I started like at the beginning of recorded history. I even went before recorded history, all the way back with Jane L. Greek thoros. What is it? Boldness or confidence, right? Nietzsche was the will to power, and this is the courage to go after and to exercise one's power. And the interesting thing is that power, what stands between us and nothingness? Well, what stands between us and nothingness, according to Nietzsche, is the power to make something be or bring something into being or for ourselves to be, right? It's from the French, coeur, right? Heart is a heart that symbolizes much more than just emotion and courage. So to have heart, right, is often the expression we use to designate courage. And Spinoza coined this weird term, conatus, right? It's the struggle to be against nothingness. And this is Tillich's book was big on this, and I've been reading about this all morning long, is that really we have being or we have nothingness. And nothingness is defined as the absence of being, right? So, but we face this anxiety of becoming nothing, that is of non-being or nothingness, and that is one way that we can display courage in that struggle. So further irony alert, and let's get contemporary here. Contemporary. We're not talking 1970s, and we have Erica Jong, right? Wrote this seminal book, Fear of Flying, and it was just a feminist work par excellence, right? And it appears that courage requires fear, and Erica Jong's idea here is, I've not ceased being fearful, but I've ceased to let fear control me. And as we look at the women's liberation movement in the 1960s and the 1970s, we see how important this is, because women were faced with a portrayal of who they should be, and to bust out of that then generated a great deal of fear, right, in adopting this new place in humanity for women. So long legacy there, and fascinating times, the 60s and 70s, as women's liberation, that movement, equal rights Strange we still don't have an Equal Rights Amendment, but I digress and get political. So, the power of the situation really has a lot to do with courage, and the power of the situation is how we're often tested. Will we display courage or not, right? We will experience the fear, but how will we respond to that fear, and can it be considered courageous? And I see this man here standing in protest, and that's courage, because he's facing death, he's facing his non-existence every day that goes by, and he's assisting people who are facing that struggle between being and non-being. So, what does Nelson Mandela say? Well, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but who conquers that fear. So that's really kind of this repeating element of courage, is I'm afraid, and regardless of my fear, I'm going to continue to act in this forward manner, right? And defines courage. And I think Mandela would have a lot to know and a lot to say about this when we look at his life and his life's trajectory. Who is courageous? Well, I remember in high school we had to read this book, Profiles in Courage, President John F. Kennedy. And in the preface to Profiles in Courage, Senator Kennedy at the time discusses the problems of political courage in the face of constituent pressures, right? And the light shed on those problems by the lives of past statesmen. He describes 3 types of pressure faced by senators. A senator who's likely going to run for re-election or make relationships within the Senate has a pressure to be liked, and then has a pressure to be re-elected, and then has the pressure of constituency and interest groups. And so Profiles in Courage talk about the political manifestation of courage in this regard. And one thing we do see in this day and age is an awful lot of non-courageous politicians. We see a lot of politicians that might say, hey, I'm going to bang the drum here, I'm not going to fall pressure to this, but then, within a week, they made that statement, and then they're caving in. A decided lack of pressure, lack of courage in politics now. So, is courage an inner resolve? Well, without a moment's hesitation, before taking on something felt to be hazardous, the act would exemplify not so much courage as foolhardiness or mindless impulsivity. So it's an inner resolve not to be governed by the fear that makes courage that's a quality to be universally admired. It's a conscious decision in the face of danger. It's not denying the danger. It's embracing the danger, so to speak. It's being mindful of the danger and saying, regardless of this danger, I must act. And when we look at President Kennedy, President Kennedy saved his crew, right, at great personal injury during World War II. And that was an act of courage, a tremendous act of courage by Kennedy. And Kennedy was a courageous human being. It was one of his defining characteristics. Did he make mistakes? Sure as hell did. He made more than his mistakes. Was he human? Sure. More than human. But he was also a courageous human being. A lot of reverence for President Kennedy. My family, my mom and dad, were both what you would call Kennedy Democrats. And so I grew up with a lot of positive Kennedy associations. Okay. He's the first Roman Catholic that became president. And there was in the United States, a tremendous anti-Catholic prejudice. Interesting where it's gone today. Because the Republican Party was tremendously anti-Catholic, and in this short period of time now they seem to embrace the Catholics. Go figure how time transforms. So, courage is that inner resolve. It's that intentionality. So, let's talk Viktor Frankl. And in Psych of Adjustment this semester, a lot of people have chosen to read for their classic work in psychology, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? And it's certainly a story of courage, not just a story of meaning, but a story of courage. And existential psychology philosophy really kind of is about courage as much as any other single construct. So between stimulus and response, and we've had assignments that discuss this relationship, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. in our response lies the growth and our freedom, right? And it's courage about making this choice. It's in that space. And notice that when we talk existential psychology or philosophy, it really is this emphasis on personal responsibility, and it's how do we choose in that moment of time, right? Because it is a choice at that moment in time, right? We could be amoebas that just move the opposite direction when a stimulus touches us, right? But here is we choose the response in that space. Viktor Frankl, if you will. So, courage to be? Tillich then, and I told you that's the book I'm reading. Courage is essential virtue from which all others derive. Ultimately, courage to be is the essence of existence, right? So, more anxiety than fear, given fear's typically identifiable source, we can usually, I'm afraid of this or I'm afraid of that. Anxiety is usually something that we experience in the face of the unknown. And in this case, existential anxiety, we either exist or we become nothing, right? And it's the courage to participate in life and make choices that are meaningful, right, that reify our existence in life. That's the courage to be. In the face of this existential anxiety of non-being, which will befall us all at some point in the future. And the central question then is to be or not to be. And this has been a question since man has been able to contemplate it, right? And central as portrayed in Hamlet. Tillich goes on to describe three anxieties: death and fate, and the ancients were wedded to this idea, and the Iliad and the Odyssey are really kind of a discussion moving us through this idea of death and fate. And death is something over which we have no control, and fate was often used to explain how death is meted out to us. But it's the courage to continue to be and to choose to be, rather than to succumb to the fear, the anxiety of one's ultimate death. And anxiety is the better word there than fear. Guilt and condemnation is the next anxiety. So to what extent am I going to break a rule or create some kind of moral dilemma for myself in which I come out on the poor end of it, right? And then suffer the condemnation, and it can be the condemnation of others, it can be the self-condemnation. And this was largely one of the struggles that mankind went through, according to Tillich, during the medieval times. And this is with the ascendancy of the Catholic Church. And notice the Catholic Church would absolve, that in confession you're absolved of these sins, you're absolved of these mistakes, and essentially they won't count against you when the final reckoning occurs, right? So I think it's amazing how Tillich lays out these anxieties and ties them to these kind of epochs, these eras, which is very consistent with tone and time that we've been talking about in this class. And then emptiness and meaningless, and this is of our time. For example, T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. I just bought a copy. I haven't read it yet because I'm still reading Tillich's book, right? Picasso, Dali, Pollock, all these guys look at and explore the idea of what is the meaning of my life. And I'm sure many of you have asked yourself this question: why am I here? What am I doing? What is the meaning? And this can be scary, because what if we get to the end of the road and we discover there was no meaning? It's just been a big joke that's been played on us, right? What is our existence for? Does it have purpose? Is there meaning? And of course, the existential philosophers and psychologists come back and say, yeah, it's got as much meaning as you make out of it. But it won't be supplied to you. And at some point it's going to be over, and there ain't shit you can do about it, right? Existential psychology and philosophy are not heartwarming ideas, but they do personify the courageous struggle to face death and fate, the unknown, to accept guilt and condemnation, to face the emptiness and create meaning. So it's a tremendous story of personal responsibility. Now, Anxiety, and Tillich differentiates anxiety of the kind I've been describing here with clinical anxiety, as in anxiety disorders, which can be treated, right, through psychotherapy and maybe through medication. There is no treatment for existential anxiety, so we really are on our own. I mean, we can discuss it with each other, we can share our ideas, and the way we approach our existential identity, but you don't go to a doctor and have your existential anxiety cured. It isn't something to be cured. It's something to face on a daily basis. And being mindful and choosing to face it is part of the courage. So, let us look at another existential psychologist, philosopher, Rollo May. Vanity, narcissism, the compulsive need to be admired and praised, undermine one's courage because they take away from us our own choices, and it places those choices onto another person. So they choose how we should appear, and then we attempt to conform. And this is one of the nasty aspects of advertising, as we've described, as we discussed earlier. That is that they undermine one's courage, for one then fights on someone else's conviction rather than one's own in an effort to gain acceptance. Right? So existential psychology, the creation of personality, we're going to go back to Rollo May. I think a nice portrait of May here. We're the humanists, and those of you who've taken positive psychology, you know this as well as anyone, right? If you've taken psychomotivation with me, you know it as well. Where the humanists see a goal of self-actualization, the existentialists see a goal of authenticity. And authenticity is living in a way that's consistent, that's compatible with one's physical, mental, and spiritual components. So we have to be mindful, and we have to be ever introspective of who we are. And then we have to make choices. We have to be courageous to make choices on the basis of an attempt to be authentic, to be true to ourselves, I guess might be another way to put it. It's a more difficult path than the humanists offer us in self-actualization, because authenticity is defined individually. To be authentic is about you, and solely you, and not giving in to what others say or what others promote, but making these choices on oneself for oneself. So, the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, according to Rollo May, it's conformity. And if we shy away from becoming authentic, if we become too anxious about authentic and how will I come off is one of those big questions. And it's like, who should care how I come off? I should care how I should come off, right? But not have that determined by the people around me. So choosing to be authentic is the ultimate courage in existential philosophy and psychology. So existentialism, and Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, Paul Tillich, Soren Kierkegaard, and I suggest that you read all these folks in their original language. I'm doing pretty well. I'm chipping it away. I've read Kierkegaard, Frankl, May, Tillich, Camus, Sartre, guess who's next? Beauvoir. And Beauvoir is one of the original feminists, so definitely got her on the reading list as well. The goal of authenticity then, right, requires constant introspection and constant movement forward. So I got to be mindful, and I got to choose myself in the future. When one ceases the forward motion of becoming more authentic, then one experiences guilt for living in the past. I'm just the same old, same old. I'm not making progress. I'm not becoming more authentic, right? But if I'm moving forward and approaching this authenticity that I've defined for myself, right, and got no outside source to say, good job, buddy. I mean, it's all on me, right? Then I face the anxiety of the unknown, because I don't know how this story is going to turn out, because I'm the only one who can write it, and I'm in the process of writing it. So the end is not in sight. There's not a predefined end. And will I do it? I don't know. But I'm going to try anyway. But that's anxiety evoking. And the courage comes in with choosing that anxiety of forward motion rather than suspending forward motion and experiencing the guilt of living in the past. So it requires the courage to choose anxiety over guilt, right? And the titles that could be looked at here, right? Existential Psychology, you could general book, anything by Camus probably gets at this. Soren Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling is an effort, right? And I read it for a class, and I'm glad I did. And the professor was amazing. It was a correspondence course, and it took forever to get through the book because he kept having me rewrite things. He said, "This is fantastic, but I want you to now consider this and rewrite it." So it was a wonderful relationship with someone I never met face to face. Simone de Beauvoir, right? What do we say? The Ethics of Ambiguity. Hallmark book by Simone de Beauvoir. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Whole bunch of psych and adjustment students reading that. No Exit. What if hell is other people? Oh God. Let's not go there. And then Tillich. This is the one I'm immersed in right now. So what do we know? Carl Jung. Where your fear is, there's your task. So the fear and the anxiety are what we got to pay attention to. And let me ask, do you have the courage to pursue that task? And that's what the courage is about, right? So courage and morality are probably considered separately. Morality is not courage. It takes a certain level of courage to rob a bank, right? You don't know how it's going to work out. Entails known risk that generates fear of capture. Those are all legitimate fears, right? One chooses to rob the bank in spite of the fear of getting caught. It is a courageous act. Now, I know I'm bending, I'm stretching a point, right? But the act of robbing a bank is likely not considered moral, right? Now that's an easy. So courage is not likely positively or negatively valenced. It's not a positive negative thing. It transcends all of that, right? So, and digression, we had a nice, I hope you thought it was a nice lecture on psychopathy. It presents an interesting thought experiment in this context because psychopaths are often labeled as existing in the absence of fear. So is their behavior courageous or not? And another way to look at it. So the domains to display courage, what do we know? Well, physical courage, this is the courage most people think of first. Bravery and the risk of bodily harm. Matt Dillon, I don't know how many people in the 24 years of Gunsmoke on TV, how many Marshall Dillon, how many bad guys he faced down, and they do it face to face, and it's really the speed of the draw, and that's courage because anyone could be faster than you, and anyone could put that bullet in you before you put your bullet in them, right? But consider these as well. There's social courage. There's intellectual courage. There's moral courage, there's emotional courage, right? And there's spiritual courage. And these come to us from Alexander Atkins, and you can go to his site if you like. Rosa Parks is demonstrating tremendous courage. Regardless of the consequences, and I can't know what they are, I'm going to sit here because I believe it's the right thing to do, right? So she's got social, moral, emotional, spiritual courage all wrapped up into one. Thank you, Rosa Parks, right? So learning courage, the three themes. I'm going to cut it here, and we'll go to part 2.